I've been lucky enough to have more than my fair share of rare and interesting watches come through my collection. Some you've seen, some you haven't. One thing I haven't really talked about before now is how I source and find them. That changes today. Welcome to Addicted to Watches. Today, I'm going to go over some of the tips and tricks that I've learned over the years from browsing for and hunting down either specific models, bargain prices, and plain old rare or uncommon watches. I'll be talking mostly about doing this with watches made by Seiko, as, if you've seen any of my other videos, I clearly have a thing for that brand in particular. Prepare yourself though, this video got a little out of hand because I found so many watches I wanted to show you. The 100 odd watches you'll see later were all found using keywords I've put in my video description. If you want to skip straight to that part of the video, I'll put a timestamp somewhere in here. In my opinion, there are three things you need a combination of in order to find rare, interesting or bargain Seikos like I do for the channel here. The first is knowing where and how to look. That I can show you. The second is looking regularly. There are always new watches being listed for sale somewhere, so checking all the time can increase your chances of snapping them up before someone else. The third and final thing is not really something I can help you with, and that's just a bit of luck. I'll break up this video into two separate sections. At the beginning now I'll explain my methods, and in the second half I'll show you how I use them, with the help of the sponsor of this video, Yahoo, who helped me and you find and buy watches from the best places to look and for some of the best prices. There are generally two ways I'll find out about a watch. One will be looking through shopping websites like eBay, Yahoo Auctions, or even Mercari, but the other, like many of you, will be from watching videos on YouTube or seeing pictures on Instagram, Facebook, or any other social media platform. Oftentimes, you may only have a picture of a watch to go from, no model number or anything else. So, how can you find out more about the watch? Well, if you've looked at the details on pretty much any Seiko watch, you'll notice that there are usually two numbers or codes, both at the bottom of the dial and somewhere on the caseback. They are usually in the form of two 4-digit codes. The first is the reference of the movement, so you'll often see something like 4R35, 6R15, 7N43, and so on. This first number always tells you the movement inside of the watch, which can also be helpful if you're looking for donor movements or parts. The second number, like these we can see here, are a reference for the case itself. Each of Seiko's different case designs and shapes has its own designation and can be found in this part of the code. By using these two pieces of information, you can look for and find more information about that watch, ones with the same movement, or ones that share the same case design. What it also means is if you know Seiko have a range of watches you're interested in that use specific movements, you can use those codes to search for them. You'll get to watch in almost real time as I search some of the Japanese platforms to look for some interesting watches. By the end of the video, I'm also actually going to be buying one, so stick around to see me put my money where my mouth is. The other thing that you should stick around to see is me sharing what I think is one of the best bargains I've scored in the past. But where do you search? Being a Japanese brand with many JDM models, Japan is the obvious choice, but many online shops and marketplaces in Japan don't or won't sell to anyone outside of Japan. Some of these can include Yahoo Auctions, Rakuten, Mercari Japan, and Yahoo Japan Fleamarket. However, you don't have to let that stop you from sourcing these rare, vintage, or just bargain priced watches. That's where Yahoo, the sponsor of this video, comes in. With Yahoo, you can search and shop on a wide range of these websites as if you're doing so from in Japan. When you make a purchase through Yahoo, the item will be sent to their warehouse location in Japan and then shipped internationally to you. During this process, you also have handy options to consolidate packages to save on shipping costs and have them inspected for faults. By combining the right searching techniques with access to these platforms through Yahoo, you can do what I've been doing and get your hands on some pretty special pieces for very reasonable prices. As we look at some of these watches, I'll have price conversions up on the screen as well. This video is being recorded in early January 2025, and at the moment the exchange rate, especially from the US dollar to the yen, is very good. But these rates are always changing, so it may be slightly different in the future if you're watching this video then. Japanese sellers are often very thorough with their listings, and will include the movement and case reference codes found on the caseback in either their title or description. By searching using those reference codes, which I explained how to find earlier, and other terms which are on the screen now, you can find many of them for sale on these platforms. I'm mainly searching here on Yahoo Auctions, which is labelled as J Direct Items Auction, Mercari, and Yahoo Fleamarket, also labelled as J Direct Items Fleamarket. The auctions are where you have the best chance to score a bargain if there are no other bidders, but Mercari and Fleamarket offer the certainty of getting the watch for the price you see and being able to buy it straight away, rather than waiting until the end of the auction. What I'm going to do now is switch over to the buyee page and do some searches to see what we find. In my video description I've put a list of all the search terms that I use, as well as details on how you can get 10% off your first order with buyee. A big thanks to them for sponsoring this video. Putting what I said earlier into practice, I'll be recording some of the results of my searches, not just from one period in time, but regularly over the course of a week or so, because as I said, new watches are released every day for sale, so checking regularly can be important. Now for the fun part, shopping and browsing for watches vicariously through me before going there yourself after the video, of course. Here on the main homepage of buyee, we can see the various shopping platforms along the top, including those three I mentioned we'll be looking at now. Let's start with the first one, Yahoo Auctions, and begin our search with 4R34, Seiko's automatic GMT movement. Straight away, we can see this 5KX GMT in grey and gold. That was an American only release, and one I have in my own collection as well. With 4 hours to go, there are still no bids at just over 46,000 yen. I'll put the US dollar conversions on the screen as we go. Back to the results, and moving a little further down, here's this white dialed GMT also from the 5 series. This particular colour version was only released in Japan. It's got a starting price of just over 37,000 yen, but with only a few hours left, still has no bids. Back in the results, and I'll spare you some of the scrolling, but lots are available around the 40,000 yen mark. Changing the search to 4R35, and we'll get the non-GMT version of the movement. Right at the top there's a cocktail time, again with no bids. This one looks like the Sari 028, rose gold case and silver dial. This one has quite a low price again, at just 27,000 yen for the opening bid. Down further, there is a Samurai, and this one here, which looks like one of the JDM SZSB models. That black dial and gold accents looks pretty nice. Looks like the stickers are still on the bracelet, and an opening bid of just 27,000 yen. Scrolling down a little more, and you can really see there is a wide variety of styles available. This black dialed Presage is a dressy option, and even though it's had a fair bit of attention with 22 bids, the price is still not that high. I'll spare you the scrolling and skip right to some of the interesting pieces I came across, like this Tic Tac collaboration model in the less common green colour. It looks like it's got some light marks, but it is a used watch after all. No bids yet on this either, at 44,000 yen with tax. For something a little different, how about this Nano Universe collaboration model? It was one of 300 pieces, and has this all black camo look going on. We can see that this is number 170 of 300, and comes with the box and paperwork. Still no bids on this one. I also found this Cocktail Time, nicknamed the Negroni, with a bright red textured dial. Unlike the other auctions, this one has a buyout price, similar to Buy It Now on eBay. So, no need to bid on this one. Moving on to our next search, and you can probably guess where I'm going. 4R36 for the day-date movement used in many modern Seiko 5s, turtles and more. And yes, plenty of turtles here right away, as well as some 5s mixed in. Here we have a Dress KX with a silver sunburst dial. It looks like it has a few marks, so that's probably the reason for the fairly low price, though still no one has bid on it yet. Scrolling through more results, and you can see that lots are hovering around that 20,000 yen mark. I'll skip ahead to my find now, and first up is this limited edition Brian May Red Special. These were pretty sought after when first released, and while the price is much higher than we saw for the regular models, it isn't too crazy. If you want to look for some older Golden Age Seikos, 6R15 is the search you want. Saabs, the original Green Alpinist and more all used this movement. Top of the list here is this SARG limited edition model with rose gold indices. The plain version of this is pretty rare, so this limited edition is even more so. You can see on the caseback where it says limited edition and the number out of 1956. It's had quite a few bids, but when I checked back later, still only sold for just under 40,000 yen. Back to the results however, and scrolling down we can see a few Sumos and other interesting older Seikos. A couple of Alpinists and more. The one that caught my eye was this Saab looking watch with numerals around the dial. This is a SCVS005 and came before the Saab we all know and love. But I think this one is a bit more interesting. It's had a couple of bids, but the price is still very low with a day left. For an actual Saab, we have another rare one. This time, it's a Saab 007 with Fume green dial. The price is a bit higher here, but still not really far off what the regular black and cream dial versions were selling for after being discontinued. A watch I've had myself here, the Sarks 045, and condition overall looks pretty good aside from some scratches on the bezel. One useful thing many sellers do is either show or tell you the size of the bracelet, so you can get an idea of if it will actually fit before you buy it. Another rare colour here is this brown dialed Saab 025. The condition isn't the greatest, and it's seen some wear, but I rarely see this model come up for sale, and again, the price is not unreasonable, if a little high. This one I believe is called the Transocean, and is a lesser known diver from Seiko with an integrated bracelet design. It also has extra links, which is important. This one has a buyout price, and I think it's actually quite a good price for one, just under 50,000 yen all up. For something a bit more modern, we can change the search to 6R35, a movement Seiko replaced the 15 with and use now still. This first watch looks like one of the Alpinist reissues, and comes with all boxes, paperwork, and an additional aftermarket bracelet as a bonus. 3 hours left on this, but still no bids. Back in the search results, we can see some more Alpinists, and this steel bezel diver that really caught my eye as well. I think it's the combination of black dial and steel bezel which really works well here, and this one is selling for a pretty good price. I believe, though not officially, it's called the MM200, since it shares a very similar case design to the Marine Master. This seller has also got that handy bracelet size measuring thing. No bids on this one yet for under 75,000 yen all up. If you take it a step further, we can move up to the 6R55, used in some higher end watches from the brand. First result is this fairly recently released Presage model. I think Seiko call this a linen or textile dial, and it looks quite nice. This one is in its box and looks pretty much brand new. Yep, down here we can see the paperwork and spare links as well. It has a retail price of $1,550 here in Australia, so with this you're saving pretty much a third of the price. Watches with this movement are generally a bit more expensive, but even so, comparing these prices to what's available here, you're saving a decent chunk of change. Changing the search to something a little different, we can check out some watches using the 6R27 movement. These have a power reserve indicator and subdial for the date at 6. They're generally dressier watches, and you'll find both older and newer models from the brand with this movement. This one with an enamel dial could be yours for just over 65,000 yen. This one here also caught my eye. A limited release of 2,000 pieces. This SARW053 has an interesting feature that may not be immediately obvious. It's got a dial made from Arita porcelain by craftsmen in Japan. Just below that is another that had me interested. I've looked at this watch a few times actually. It's another limited edition with a porcelain dial, but this time with gold and brown tones. The condition looks pretty much perfect in the photos. It was available here in Australia with a retail price of $2,950, but is sold out. Here we get a chance to get a sold out limited edition with a decent discount too. Moving on to another search, 4S15, and you'll find some older and rarer Seikos. This is a higher grade movement used in previous generation alpinists, like you can see here. It was also used in this commemorative King Seiko release. It looks like this one was released in 2000 as part of Seiko's historical collection. At this price I'm not a buyer, but aside from finding bargains, browsing these Japanese platforms can help you stumble across other rare and interesting pieces to appreciate from afar. Looking more through the search results, and down here we can see a Laurel in blue that was released at the same time in 1996 as the cream dialed one in my collection. Let's change it up to something completely different and search 7B24, which will show us watches with a radio wave solar quartz movement. Most of these will be JDM models, and first up is this classy looking Dolce watch. Many of these other results come from the Brights line of watches from Seiko. And this one here looks like a precursor model to the SAGZ083 that I reviewed in my first ever video. No bids on this one yet, but it's not going for very much money at all, with just a day to go. Next up is that same SAGZ083 I mentioned, and can be had for pretty much the same price here. Condition looks good, and it has the box. If you don't like the dark dial, there is always the white version. This one looks like it's lived a slightly rougher life, but has a very low price to reflect that. Alternatively, you could pay a bit more and get this one here in much better condition. And it also looks like it at least has the paperwork and a spare link. Not sure about the box though. Never mind, there is the box in the bottom down there. For the price the bidding starts at here, you're getting a lot of watch for your money. Moving up the ladder a little to the 7B52, and we'll see some similar, well-made everyday practical watches. All of these models are JDM models, so can be tricky to find outside of Japan. This one here is still brand new with the stickers, and has an almost Explorer-like look going on with the 12 and 6. From that retail price you can see on the tag, you're saving almost 50% from the original price. I also found this SBTM213, which I did a video about not too long ago. This one has got a few scratches on the bezel, but overall still looks fine in my opinion. Failing that, just buy this one which has no bids, but 2 days to go, and appears to be in much better condition, with a crazy low opening bid as well. Climbing the movement ladder even higher, we can go to 7B72, where we'll start to see some Astron models. These first three here are the blue and white versions of the SBXY031 I reviewed on my channel, both with just a couple of hours to go and no bids. This white one would actually be my pick over the blue dial I had for increased legibility, and the condition here looks pretty good too. Also sharing this movement is another Astron model with a much more decidedly angular design. I've seen this one compared to Genta designs, and with that blue dial especially, it's hard to argue. 3 hours and no bids, but if you don't want to risk it, you can pay a little bit more for the buyout price. If you don't need the Astron name, other models also use this movement and can be had for a lot less money. This one has a very clean and simple design, but is still very well finished, and for the price of that opening bid, would be hard to beat. I also found another white Astron here for even less at under 45,000 yen. The bezel looks like it might have a couple of light marks, but nothing that would bother me. That's a buyout price as well, so no risk of bids increasing. Let's backtrack a little here and look at a more simple movement. The 7N42. This is a movement generally used in more affordable, simple quartz watches, but that's not to say they're not worth looking at or considering. And in fact right here, we found one of the very limited SZQV Nano Universe collaboration watches that set the internet on fire a few years ago. Only 300 of these were made, and I don't think many are left in the wild like this. This one looks like it's number 217 out of 300. Such a rare and sought after watch on release, yet no bids here for just over 35,000 yen. Okay, let's go all the way to the top now and look at some Grand Seikos. While newer models are pushing prices higher and higher, from Japan you can get some older double branded models for something much more reasonable. These auctions will generally be a bit more popular though, so you'll have more competition. This brown dial caught my eye here, though there have only been 2 bids on this one with just a few hours left. It's a Quartz GS, but of course, not your average quartz movement. The dial is double branded with Seiko up top and GS down the bottom. It even has the old box and paperwork. I kept that one open and checked back to see how the auction finished. Just over 100,000 yen. Whoever won that auction got a great price if you ask me. If you prefer something mechanical from Grand Seiko, this silver dialed beauty could be yours with a buyout price a hair under 200,000 yen. I think this one is a 36 or 37mm case, so perfect for someone who has smaller wrists or just likes a smaller size. This could be yours today for that price. Next up is a watch from GS unlike anything they make today. It's a quartz sports watch with lume and an angular case design. This one also looks like it's in pretty good condition, and I'm wondering a little bit if it hasn't been refinished. For a perfect daily, you could grab this one with a buyout price just under 160,000 yen. It's got a sunburst silver dial, day and date complication, understated everyday design, and the original box and papers. Switching briefly to a competitor, let's have a search for the Citizen. Citizen's top-end models only available in Japan and rivals to Grand Seiko. Right off the bat, there are a couple here under 60,000 yen. This one is an early model from the 90s and is just very clean. Simplicity well done, wrapped up in a 36mm case. On the back here you can see the Citizen, and in this next photo we get a look at some spare links and an extra strap. This one isn't an auction, so it's selling for that 58,000 yen price tag. If we jump back to the results and look a bit further down, there's no shortage of other options. Some of these more modern ones are still well under 200,000 yen, when the retail price is well over 300,000 yen. We're not just looking for regular models here though, we're after some more special ones, and this red number fits the bill. It's a limited edition of 400 pieces, and has this bright red textured dial. A colour you don't see so often. Judging by the paperwork, it's just over 2 years old, and will set you back a pretty penny. But it's a pretty special watch too. One that's more friendly on the wallet is this black dialed integrated bracelet model. As you'd expect from this line, finishing looks excellent, and the condition is very clean. The auction still has a little ways to go, but no bids yet for a very modest 68,000 yen. Enough of that, back to Seiko, and let's try our luck with some older high-end quartz, specifically Grand Quartz. These were the top quartz models of the brand before officially becoming branded as Grand Seiko. These quite often go for very cheap prices, and to me they're the perfect vintage watch. The movements are well made, serviceable if need be, accurate and reliable. Not to mention the designs, which are simultaneously timeless and unmistakably vintage. This blue one in particular is a very clean example. I don't think it's quite new old stock, but it's about as close as you'll get for something like this. Scrolling back down through the other results, and there's plenty of more options. Here is a keyword you'll want to look out for though. These characters here say junk, and it's the label used for broken or non-working items. If you see this and aren't looking to take on a project, steer clear. Luckily, there are lots of other working examples to choose from below and on the next pages. Taking things up a notch, let's do a search for Credor, a brand whose older pieces are criminally underrated in my opinion. Just like the Grand Quartz models, many of these from the 80s and 90s have very high quality movements inside, excellent finishing and construction, and in some cases incorporate precious metals at rock bottom prices for what they are. Coming back to the present day with a search for some Astron watches, here we can see there are plenty available for well below what you'd otherwise pay. If you like and can pull off some of these chunky, busy, complicated watches, they make great travelling watches with their GPS capabilities. This one here though has none of that. It's smaller, less complicated, and uses radio waves rather than GPS. But that makes it more wearable for the average person. That opening bid price is very tempting seeing no one has placed one so far. Back in the results, and you'll see many hovering around the 50 to 60,000 yen mark. Fashion brands often charge that much for low quality basic quartz watches. Let's take a slight detour to a Seiko sister brand Orient and see what's available. Being a Japanese brand with many JDM models, it's another search well worth checking out. This model here is one that I really like, with some very strong IWC looks packed into a 39mm case. It's had a bit of interest with 25 bids, so it'll be interesting to see where it ends up. Another way to explore is by going down the bottom here to the recommended items, and just getting lost in one of these rabbit holes. Straight away there is a very sought after day date nicknamed the President, though it does appear to be missing its bracelet. With 2 days left to go, the price is still very low compared to what I've seen these models sell for. Another watch in that section that caught my eye is this baby blue Bambino. This model was released as a limited edition and sold out very quickly. It's had a lot of bids, but you still have the option to buy it for 40,000 yen, which is not bad at all. I remember seeing this one sell for well over the retail price on release. You'll even get an extra grey strap that may or may not work well with the watch in my opinion. Though it is a bit beat up, this Panda chronograph is another popular model from the brand, and is currently not going for very much. The recommended items are a good way to find listings you might not have otherwise come across. In the same way that there is Seiko and Grand Seiko, there is Orient and Orient Star. This brand might not be as high-end as Grand Seiko, but it is definitely a step up from your typical Orient watch. Top of the list here is a model I've been interested in for a while, just maybe not in this colour. It combines a Flieger style with an Explorer dial layout, and I've been keeping an eye out for one. This one has the box and not left to go on the auction, but the price still hasn't gotten too high yet. Down a bit further, here is a colour I probably would buy, though this one still has a few days to go. It'll be one for me to keep an eye on, I think. The condition looks good, but judging from the pictures, it doesn't have the box or paperwork. If you watched my collection video, you'll know I'm keen on one of these Citizen NB1050 models. Since they are a JDM model, this is the perfect place to grab one. That grey sunburst dial in particular is very striking. The condition looks pretty good on this one, and it has all its accessories including extra links. It's another one with just a buyout price, so no need to wait around to be outbid. If you're after a black dial, this one here with no bids and only a couple of hours to go is a pretty good deal too. For this series from Citizen, you can pretty easily pick one up around 40,000 yen in near new condition. For something a little more special, the 1060 models with silverleaf dials are your go-to. These are usually quite a bit more expensive, and even second-hand don't lose much value from retail price. One final search you can do to cast a really broad net is, pretty obviously, just Seiko. That way you can see results with every movement from every line of watches new and old. It's another good way to just stumble across interesting or straight up weird watches. Here is one of those downright weird ones I was talking about. This is whatever a voice note is, and I can't say I've seen one before. With a price like that, it must be pretty rare, and I'm sure there is a collector somewhere out there willing to pay that much for it. Look at that, it even has the instructions on how to use it. Sometimes it's not even a watch you find, but a stopwatch like this. This time last year, I was in Japan and visited the Seiko Museum, where they had ones just like this as part of their Olympic and sports timing history. For the piece of history that something like this is, just 3,000 yen from only one bid with 3 hours to go doesn't seem like very much at all. In a recent unboxing from Japan, I had one of these interesting little SUS chronographs with silver dial, and this one is going for a very good price at the moment. For something a little out of left field, and maybe a little underappreciated, is this kinetic diver. As a whole, I find kinetic movements are largely ignored by most collectors, which I think is a bit unfortunate. This one has a lot of character and is in very good condition. One last watch I found on Yahoo auctions is this solar diver that has a strong neo-vintage vibe going. If you don't fancy bidding on auctions and want the certainty of being able to buy straight away, Mercari is the place to look. For the most part, I'll skip through the scrolling through the search results, otherwise we'd be here all day, and I'll just jump straight to the interesting watches I found. I did searches using all the same keywords, so let's take a look at what I found. This 5kx GMT comes in well under 40,000 yen, and one thing which may or may not matter to you is that since you're buying from Japan, many of the watches will be the made in Japan versions, rather than being made in Seiko's overseas factories. Back in the results, and we've got another one of those white dial field GMTs, only available in Japan. There's also another of those American edition grey and gold ones too. Those two at the bottom are quite good prices for those more recently released colour versions in brown and green. In the search results for 4R35 here, there is another of the Matcha Cocktail Time limited edition models for a pretty ambitious 170,000 yen. Further down is one of the less popular Tic Tac collaboration watches. Later in the search, I found this Blue Lagoon Samurai. You might know I really wanted this one when I learned about it, after it was sold out. Here is a chance for me to pick up a lightly used one for not too much of a premium, but still more than I'd like to spend on one. Down further in the results, here is another limited edition Cocktail Time, this time in everyone's favourite light blue colour. If we keep looking down here, there is actually something very interesting. This is a very recently released, but very quietly released successor to the original Tic Tac collaboration that was a massive hit for Seiko. This time they've used a cream dial, and the asking price here is not bad at all. Another find in my Mercari search was this light blue 5kx diver that I thought looked really nice. One thing you'll notice when searching across the different platforms is that the same watches are listed in multiple places, like this green Saab 007 we saw earlier. Below that is another pretty rare Saab 030 in gold for almost the same price. And this Sarks 035 for something a little sportier, like this very unique Saab 041 with something a bit like a cushion case. The asking price here is also actually not bad at all, especially in comparison to those others we just looked at. Here is an opportunity to get something pretty unique and special, and it looks to be in very good condition as well. The listing description down below has also conveniently already been translated for you to find out the details. Another Saab with a white dial, but this time the 023 with a sporty angular case. Condition here looks quite good, and the price is also more than reasonable. It's even got an extra link for the bracelet. Next up is this SARG, and even the seller is telling you it's rare and discontinued. I think this model is part of the Alpinist family, with that internal rotating bezel, but has a more traditional dial, both in colour and layout. It's got its box and papers, and all for again a pretty reasonable 55,000 yen price. Again in the results we're seeing another watch we saw earlier on Yahoo auctions. I also spotted this Prospex diver for sale, but at a slightly cheaper price than the one we looked at before, and without the risk of the price increasing in the auction. This one has some light marks, but as you can see, does also come with the box and paperwork. I spotted this recently released diver from Seiko, which is apparently a limited edition, in near new condition. This retails for $2,350 here in Australia, so you're getting a pretty decent discount with this one. As you'd expect for a watch this new, it comes with all of its boxes and paperwork. Or you could get something a little different with this one. It's got that 6R27 movement, and the asymmetry here is pretty appealing. It looks a little more sporty than dressy with that black dial. This seller has provided the bracelet size as well, which is very handy for prospective buyers. I won't claim to know a whole lot about this one, other than that I know having the red 12 is a bit special, and I've seen it on a couple of other models. This one looks to be in pretty good condition overall in its original box, and the price is hard to go past. My search of the older 4S15 movement brought me to this titanium diver here. I'm not going to say that I'm in love with the design of this one, but at this price it looks pretty good value to be getting into that older but higher end movement. Looking at some Astrons, and here we have another of these simple blue dialed SPXYs I reviewed previously on my channel. The condition looks pretty good, with nothing standing out. For something a little nicer, how about this Grand Seiko Quartz that's been channeling its inner explorer? At 36mm, it's a very comfortable size, and that price more than makes up for the fact that it doesn't have a box. It does have this engraving on the back, but to me that makes it even more interesting and gives it a bit of a story to look into. The description doesn't help much to find out what that story is, unfortunately. Going back a bit further into Grand Seiko history, and you'll find this watch. I have one of these in my own collection, and it was the first quartz watch to be branded as Grand Seiko. It's got a simple, elegant design and very comfortable bracelet. With quartz watches especially, one thing I do to make sure they're working is to check different pictures and make sure the second hand is in a different spot in each picture. If the second hand doesn't move between photos, you can safely assume that the watch at least needs a new battery, or at worst has bigger problems to potentially worry about. Next up is an earlier Grand Quartz model with a very retro square case. That crystal does have a scratch or two, but it is quite an old watch after all. The seller has left no guesswork about the case diameter here with this picture. Like Yahoo auctions, here on Mercari, there are also plenty of the Citizen models to look at. This one looks to be one of the washi paper dials, and, if so, is priced very competitively. This time around, I found a white dial version of this model on the integrated bracelet. The condition looks pretty decent overall, but when you scroll down to read through the details, we can see that it will only fit up to 16cm, and with no extra links by the look of it. A watch that is a little bit extra special is this Credor I came across. It's from their Pacifique collection, and is a limited edition of 999 pieces. With an automatic chronograph movement inside, and a beautifully finished case, if you've got a bigger budget, this would make a pretty unique addition to any collection. Down here, we can see the size will apparently fit up to 19-ish centimeters, so not bad. Looking at Orient, there is this black and gilt version of the Orient Star IWC lookalike that we found on Yahoo. This time it's on a bracelet, and has all of the boxes and paperwork that go along with it. Unfortunately, down here in the description, we can see that the bracelet will only fit up to 17cm, so that's a no-go for me, unfortunately. Another Orient Star for sale here on Mercari is this, I think, blue dial version of the Explorer Flieger. That all-brushed case will manage any scratches it might have pretty well, and the leather strap doesn't look like it's been worn very much either. Back to Astron, but this time with the GPS movement. Here is this all-black model on a silicon band. The condition here looks pretty good, even on that polished bezel around the dial. At just over 56,000 yen, I think that is not a bad price at all for a GPS Astron. I suspect the case size is probably a bit bigger than I'd like though. The description down here doesn't help much with that and is pretty basic. My search for a Citizen led me to this black dialed NB1050 for 36,500 yen. It's got all of its goodies, and the condition looks to be pretty close to new. I think this white dial silver leaf for just under 74,000 yen is getting close to one of the best prices I've seen this model get listed for. It's a bit hard to see the condition in detail from the photos, but when I zoom in here, there are only some slight signs of wear. The final platform to cover briefly here at the end is Yahoo Fleamarket, or J-Direct Items Fleamarket. Compared to the other two we've already looked at, the range of items listed is a bit more limited, but it is still definitely worth having a look. From my 4R34 search here again, we found one of those white dial field GMTs. I did, however, make this discovery of a matcha presage for a much more realistic 70,000 yen as opposed to the 170,000 asking price we saw before. The condition of this one looks fine to me, but the main reason for that price could be the fact that the box is missing. Here, we also have the black dial version of the Saab 021 I mentioned previously that I had in my collection. For a watch of this age, the condition actually looks really good, and even though it might take a bit of a closer look, that image with the tape measure can help you work out the size of the bracelet. It even has the box and paperwork for that 52,000 yen asking price. The Sharp Edge series is a line within the Presage family that I've always been curious about, and this green dial with gold secondhand is pretty striking. In these pictures, we can see it's got the box and paperwork, and the condition of the watch looks mint. This seller saved us some time by putting the 17cm bracelet size in the listing title, but if you've got the right wrist size, this one is a bit of a bargain at just 15,000 yen. Usually when they're priced this low, the condition leaves a lot to be desired, but this watch doesn't look like it's been worn much at all. This SBTM is another model we found earlier, and this one in particular looks like it's in pristine condition. It has its box, and what looks like a spare link at the bottom of the picture. If you like titanium and want a simple but reliable everyday watch, this is a great option. Back to an Orient, and this looks like one of the recently released Solar Mako models. Of the three colours they put out, I think this one looks the best, and we can see that in addition to being in excellent condition and having all of the boxes plus paperwork, it's priced well below retail. Up next is another Astron, this time on a bracelet and with its original box. This one has that GPS solar movement, making it very practical for travellers, and though that clasp looks like it's got a little wear, isn't bad overall. The asking price here is more than low enough to balance that out though, if you ask me. More Citizens, and this is the cheapest grey dial version I found on my hunt, coming in at 38,000 yen. Looking through the pictures, the condition seems to be pretty good, even though the seller describes it as a little dirty. I find that sellers generally err on the side of caution when it comes to describing condition. Another black dial version is available here for 36,000 yen. A find from the general Seiko search is this smaller size Flightmaster with a brilliant blue dial. For this price, it's almost a no-brainer. One final watch from my searches is this fairly unassuming, but very nice, vintage Type 2 Quartz. Ooh, I think that's very close to, if not over, 100 watches we just looked at from my searches. When I started out making this video, I can assure you I wasn't intending to include that many, but it does go to show the sheer volume of interesting, rare, and/or bargain Seiko watches you can find readily available for sale in Japan if you know how to look. And hopefully if you've made it this far through the video, you now know where to look and how to look for them too. If after all of that you haven't had enough and want to go there yourself to see what you can find, don't forget about the link in the video description where you can sign up and get an extra 10% off your first order. If you have made it this far, you deserve a little reward. Two in fact, which I promised earlier in the video. The first is showing you that I put my money where my mouth is, both figuratively and literally. While I was doing all of this browsing, I bought a watch from Japan through Bai. Which one did I buy? It was the new Tic Tac collaboration with the cream dial that we looked at. I haven't seen a single YouTube video about it, and only a couple of small articles talking about it. So, I think it'll be a very interesting watch to take a look at in depth in an upcoming video. Keep an eye out for that one coming soon. The other reward? The best bargain I've scored in my searches. It's a watch I still have in my collection at the moment, and, coincidentally enough, is also another Tic Tac collaboration. It's the silver dialed version, and I managed to win this one in an auction where I was the only bidder for 28,930 yen. It was described in the listing as a little dirty, but when I received the watch and inspected it carefully, I couldn't find any issues with it. It goes to show that many of those auctions with a few hours left and no bids don't actually end up getting bid on, so there are definitely opportunities there to score a bargain. I'd like to thank Bai again for sponsoring this video. It was an idea I'd had in the back of my mind for a while, and when Bai reached out, it was the perfect opportunity to show you all one way I find watches to make videos for my channel here. If you made it all the way to the end of this now very long video, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed shopping and browsing vicariously through me for a while. What do you think about the watches we looked at? Would you have bought any? Was there an absolute bargain I scrolled right past? Have you found a better deal than my silver Tic Tac? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.